Joe talks about Joe. And now, your host, Joe Slepsky.
Hello, and welcome back to Joe on Joe Extreme. It's me, your host, Joe Slepsky, and this is an exciting episode, guys, because this is Season 2, Episode 1 of G.I. Joe Extreme, and I'm here to say it's pretty awesome. And so with that, I'm very happy to welcome back to the show a fan of the show, friend of the show. He previously was on our Sunbow, so it's been like 3 years since we talked to him, but he's awesome. He's calling in from northwestern Pennsylvania. It's Jesse McCullough, a.k.a. Pharma Joe. You guys know him from his Joe and Joe code name. Welcome back to the show, Jesse McCullough.
Hey, Joe, thanks for having me back. It's so good to be back and catch up with you.
And I'm so happy to have you back. Thank you for reaching out. And listeners, if you guys want to be guests on the show, make sure you reach out to joeandjoepod@gmail.com and let me know. Jesse, it's been a few years. How have you been?
I tell you, Joe, things have been going pretty well. I've gone through several changes since you and I spoke last, but
Explain
I have
for the class. Explain for the class, please.
So, as you mentioned, my code name being Pharma Joe, I am the pharmacist on the team, and my career has taken a couple of different turns since the last time. Yeah. So I went and helped to try to influence pharmacy from a different perspective for a couple of years, and now I'm actually in the space of doing some research. So it's really been some different life experiences for me, to say the least.
Research. What do you mean? What are you doing these days then?
So these days, Joe, what I'm involved with is I'm working on some research where we're working with pharmacies to engage patients to really get a better understanding of what life is like living with diabetes and how we can best help improve their therapy as we go forward. So it's really it's an important disease state. I hope that none of your listeners have it, although I would suggest that most of your listeners know somebody at least that has diabetes, and it is such an important disease for us to get a better handle on and to be able to improve patient care with.
Oh, for sure, man. That I didn't realize you were doing that these days. That's huge. Rampant in my family.
Really?
Yeah, rampant. I've got a cousin who ended up having to get a kidney transplant after years of it. My father was late life diagnosed with a form, a form of it. I forget which one. Aunt, other cousin, like it's on both sides of my family. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's out there. I think the national statistics is something like 8 or 9%, but when you multiply that out by 300 plus million Americans, you're looking at 20, 30 million people that wrestle with this condition every day. So I actually went to a boot camp here to try to use a Joe term, right? I went to a diabetes boot camp.
Was it run by Vance Wingfield?
No, it was not. But I went to this boot camp, and you had to live as a diabetic for a couple of days, and it was really interesting to do that. It's what fascinated me about doing that was just I'll use the term mental burden, and that may be a poor choice of words, but it was always 2 steps from the front of your mind, right? It's like, oh, I want to eat something. Oh, I need I need to reconsider that. It really was just a very taxing condition, and so there's a lot of folks out there that have it, and I'm sure there's a lot of folks out there that would want to be treated better with
Sure.
it to get back to some semblance of normal life, especially as we talk about normal life in the context of COVID-19.
Yeah,
we want to get back to some semblance of what that looks like as well.
that is the weird thing when something like COVID crops up, which obviously hasn't something on this scale hasn't happened in quite some time. But when it does, that tends to supersede all of it. But then you realize, oh, but people are still living with diabetes. People are still fighting cancer. People are still, dealing with HIV and all that. Like it's just one more thing on top of all this other stuff. Is there any type of website or organization that if any listeners out there have who are afflicted, they want to look up and you can help them?
Well, at this point, Joe, no, I wouldn't say that. This is a research project, so it's we are doing this in conjunction with a number of pharmacies peppered across the country. So I would say this. If as it turns out, any listeners know somebody, feel free to reach out to me through the podcast. And if we have a local pharmacy that's participating, I could probably point you in that direction.
Oh, great! So it's like it's like some kind of trial treatment kind of thing.
Yeah, it's not on investigational drugs. It's on drugs that the people are already taking, and just looking to how can we use them better.
Oh, that's Jesse. That's fascinating, and I love that. When you were christened as Farmer Joe, I forget. So Farmer Joe, you were on the G.I. Joe team, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good. Well, I was going to say, because if you happen to choose Cobra, you'd have to switch sides right now.
That's true. That's true.
Well, that's great. And how is the quarantine? We're calling it quarantine. How is that treating you? Are you guys good? I know you've got some kids and.
Yeah. I will tell you, Joe, that whenever this started, there was part of me that felt this is what I've been training for my entire life. It was, but it's been very eye-opening to me. So, since when was that? Mid-March that started.
Like
the
March 15th. That's kind of the day.
Yeah, something like that. And here we are. We're recording this the day before the 4th of July, right? So we've been dealing with this for. I can't even do the math.
Well, it'll be 4 months. 4 months. 4 months in a week or so.
Yeah. So it was interesting. For sure. And I will tell you that in my work, I largely been able to work from home for like the last 2+ years. So it wasn't a real big change for me. But having the kids home was different. And having the kids go through learning how to do remote schooling, that was new. And also, the teachers were learning how to remote teach as well. There was so much change that was I will say forced on us, right? We had to adapt quite a bit in a very, very short period of time. And so it's been an interesting deal, but we have held up remarkably well through that. Everybody's doing well. I will tell you, where I live is no man's land, really. In the county that I live in, I think we have about 60,000 people. So you being out in the Los Angeles area, you probably can see 60,000 people from your window, is my guess. But for me, it's the entire county, right? And I think we've only had we've had fewer than 50 cases last time I checked. Fewer than 50 cases of COVID-19 and no fatalities. So we have not been impacted anywhere near the way some of the larger cities and stuff like that have been.
Right.
So very, very blessed in that regard.
Yeah, that's good. That's the weird thing about this is it's hitting people very hard. There's so many people out there that are like, I don't have any, I don't know anyone, I don't know anyone. But I think that's a function of the people that are dying don't have voices on social, if that makes sense.
Well, yeah, I would say this, there's different camps out there. Have you heard of anybody? And I will tell you that I know someone who knows a family that lost two family members to COVID-19.
Yep.
Right. So, just 1 degree, I think that's 1 degree of separation, whatever that is. I know a friend of mine is in the greater New York City area. He survived COVID-19.
Yep.
A guy that used to served on my team, he and his wife, they're down in South Carolina. They both had COVID-19 and they have come through on the other side of it. So, it's interesting that they're now a couple of those folks would be on social media. Some are on against their probably against their better judgment, and some I would be sort of skeptical if they were on before.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is that it is out there.
Oh, for sure, absolutely, yeah.
And it's novel, which makes the learning curve. I will tell you this, Joe. I don't know if we shared this before, but a big part of my pharmacy career was in training pharmacists to give immunizations. So in 2005, I was one of 13 pharmacists in a training class in Pennsylvania to learn how to give immunizations. By the time I was done training pharmacists, this would have probably been 2011, maybe 2012, we had trained probably about 13,000 pharmacists across a major pharmacy group. And and just to do that, you learn an awful lot. And we studied the Spanish flu as part of that training, and so on and so forth. But to live through this is something else, right? The opportunity to see just the speed at which we are able to gather new information, new knowledge, the speed with which that can be disseminated now is exponentially faster than what it was 100 years ago during the Spanish flu, right? Now that being said, there I would also say it was probably a little bit unprecedented to say, hey, just don't leave your house, right?
Right.
That's tough. That's tough. But that is a valid. I mean, a virus by definition doesn't live outside of a host,
right?
It's you can educate me, on how long venom can live outside of Peter Parker or Eddie Brock, but I don't know that particular deal all that well. But the virus has to have a host, so if it can be, if it can be contained, then that is at least a strategy that should be leveraged.
You're
right?
So right. And if you look at those the curves that are being shown on the news in the last few weeks, when it was when the country was in lockdown and everyone was kind of playing ball, the numbers were growing, but they were smaller, and they were kind of plateauing. And now, since people need to get out and they need to go to the beach and they need to have their drinks and they need to go bowling, the last 3 weeks have been insane, absolutely insane in the spikes. As we're recording this, the last 2 days was over 50,000 new cases.
Oh wow! I haven't paid attention that cllosely for a couple of weeks. I'm not surprised to hear that. Yeah,
it's wild, and it's and I get it. I get the part about needing to. The financial aspect of it, 100% understand that, the frustration from that, and I think that the lack of federal leadership on that point is criminal. But the part where the consumer side of it, where people just need to go out and I need to enjoy my summer, that part maddening, absolutely maddening, absolutely selfishly maddening. It is really frustrating to see.
Yeah, I would agree. One of the things that we'll probably talk about at some point. I made a cheat sheet. I have my crib notes here for as we watch this episode today. But one of the things that I put down here was leadership, and that's been an interest of mine for the last several years. But it's at all levels, right? It's at the international level, it's at the national level, it's at the state level, it's at your local level, and then it comes down to our own households, right? It's how do we lead ourselves through all of this, and it's been a fascinating thing to observe. So as a student of history, we have had a front row seat to something very spectacular. I would say this, I don't think that COVID-19 is something that anybody can quote unquote win.
Right.
I think, hindsight, you'll turn around and you'll look and you're going to say it was too much. It was not enough. I don't know that it's even possible to say we hit the bullseye. Right.
That horse left the barn. We definitely missed the bullseye.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The bullseye would have been November, whenever some of this stuff started. Right?
Yeah,
I mean,
right.
That was probably that.
Yeah.
But and the other thing is just also managing expectations. So when they say flattening the curve, this is in my education. I had to go through and learn calculus. Now I learned calculus and I never had to use calculus, but but
a statement uttered by 99% of the people who have ever taken calculus.
Yeah, but calculus is when you sit down and you say, okay, you have a bathtub and you have the drain. The drain is letting water out, but you're still putting water in. How fast will it
right.
be completely empty or overflow? Right, it's stuff like that. But one of the things that we learned how to do was to actually calculate something called area under the curve. And when we start talking about flattening the curve, what that means is you're not going to have as high of a peak, but it's going to be drawn out longer, and
right.
The area under the curve is going to remain the same, or is going to be probably very, very similar, unless unless you're able to completely eliminate it, right? So I think those are some expectations as well that we just need to be able to have, right?
Mm-hmm.
To be able to say, oh, you know what, I think there was probably some, and I admire the optimism, right? But there's also the understanding that, hey, it may not go away. Like
Well, yeah. I mean, I think the concept of it going away is not really a thing. It's always going to be there. The hope is that they can get some type of either straight up vaccine or just aggressive
mm-hmm.
mitigation. Antiviral drugs in place that we move on with it, but until then we all got to do our part, and
yep,
there's a lot of us that are doing it. Wearing a mask is very, very easy to do, and
mm-hmm.
Just this week people were now, like, Texas is saying, now wear a mask. It's almost 4 months into it, moron. Like,
mm-hmm.
It's not that hard to do, and trust me, I'm not a huge fan of mask wearing. It's not great. I wear glasses. It sucks,
mm-hmm.
but it's also not terrible. It's not difficult. And listen, you can always accessorize. We should get some sweet G.I. Joe masks going on is what we should do.
Yep.
Like a Snake Eyes mask, I guess, would just be a black one.
well, that's true. That's true. But I think as we talk leadership, and how do we lead ourselves? And one of those principles is to treat others as you would be treated. Right. Right. And I think that's just that's a personal opinion, but I don't know that too many people stand in opposition to that premise. Right.
Yeah.
So what's a way that you can show kindness to someone else? And
I love it.
Unless two guys like you and me who are outrageously handsome, that really it's a crime for us to have the masks on.
That's the thing. That's really was always why I was like, I don't want to wear a mask because why deprive the world?
Exactly.
There's a reason. There's a podcast and not a YouTube channel.
That's right.
I gotta be honest. I was not expecting all this hot COVID talk. But I love it. I think this has been great. This is awesome.
Hey, that's why we have a big team here with the Joe on Joe family.
Yeah. So I'm excited because as we get into the episode today, we're gonna figure out what your new code name is.
Okay.
And what the episode that we're talking about today is fantastic. It is season 2, episode 1. It's called SKAR Under Siege, and it picks up right after the cliffhanger. So listeners, if you didn't watch last episode, please go back, or listen to last episode, please go back and listen to it. It was the episode 13 of season 1. It is such a pickup right after that. You can see how they were planning this stuff out. There was such a plan here because Iron Klaw is still, he's still Clancy. The government is literally just picking up the pieces from SKAR taking over everything. Like all the pieces have changed. They've changed code names even for someone, which we're going to get into when the show starts. And took me a second to figure out. So it's dynamite. Like, it's for real, really, really, really good. Is this your first time watching Extreme?
Well, first time in the modern era. I probably saw clips of it 25 years ago,
Yeah.
right? But yeah, actually watch an episode. Yeah, this was my first time in quite a while.
Do you remember anything from the last time you may have watched it?
Oh, no.
Yeah.
I would tell you the only thing that I remember is that Sergeant Savage was sort of the transition, right? That was it. Because, I would say that I was pretty much a Joe guy up until the end. And I remember Sergeant Savage coming on the pegs. And I did this because I was trying to be cool. I was trying to just buy all the stuff for my brother. But I'm the one that opened it. You know?
Oh, hey, Jesse. I didn't know you were at the mall today. No, it's for my brother. Nothing. It's for my brother. What?
Yeah. I was here. I had to get this for my brother.
Oh, that bag of KB toys. Yeah. It's for my brother. Oh, I don't remember asking. No, it's just for my brother.
Yep, but the only Sergeant Savage figure I had was the one that came with the VHS tape. Right?
Oh yeah,
so I got that and I watched that and I thought, oh well, there was as you've discussed on previous episodes, there's some linkage to the old to the 3 3/4 inch Joes, and so that was sort of a neat thing. But then it didn't pick up and take off from there. And so, as I remember, there was 7 different versions of Sergeant Savage.
Yeah, the action figure. Yeah, that was
series.
Yes, there were. Yeah, when we did that episode, and the actual figures they produced were absolutely that 7 different a combination of repaints and two. I think there were 2 or 3 different actual molds, and then it was a bunch of repaints, and that probably is why the Sergeant Savage didn't take off too much, because zero variety for kids to be interested in. Yeah, you're going from you're going from a cast of hundreds and hundreds of choices to 7 versions of this one dude who's a World War II Captain America knockoff.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. It was very much weren't the Batman? Well, there was a time where the Batman figures were all that way, right?
Yes.
Just different paint job.
Yes. That they ran into the same kind of creativity problem with Batman. Absolutely right. And I remember. I wasn't a Batman figure collector at all, but I remember seeing them on the pegs and thinking the same thing of there's only one dude people want. People just want Batman, and all they're doing is making 1,800 versions of Batman. And how exciting is that?
I think the answer is that it wasn't.
Right. I mean, if polar battle Batman, it didn't sing to people. Now you look back though, and there's some kitsch value to it, but at the time, I don't think it really was a winner. But that's why team toys like G.I. Joe are great, because there are such a variety of stuff. And even He-Man, to be fair, let's talk He-Man for a little bit, with the line named after. So with G.I. Joe, you're talking about a line of a group. The team is called G.I. Joe. There isn't one G.I. Joe, and in this iteration, obviously. With He-Man, it was He-Man and the Masters of the Universe. So there were only so many versions of He-Man you want. You had to expand that line, they only did 4 versions of He-Man over the 6 or 7 years that they did, right? There was the regular, the Power Punch, the chest battle SKAR one,
Yeah.
Then they were smart and they did stuff like Faker and Prince Adam.
Adam.
Yeah. And that's great, because that's storyline driven changes and actual nemesis and stuff. But they weren't putting out He-Man in a red shirt, He-Man in a green shirt, He-Man in a green vest, kind of a thing. Yeah, actually, He-Man in a shirt would have been special. I guess that's Prince Adam.
Exactly.
Well, awesome. Well, I'm excited to watch this episode, Jesse. Are you ready? You got your episode ready to go?
I am. You tell me when to press play.
Oh, I love it. Well, listeners, you're out there in the internet scouring the internet for G.I. Joe Extreme, because it is not available anywhere that we can find. While you're on the internet, find me on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram at Joe and Joe Pod. Once again, send me an email to joeandjoepod@gmail.com. Let me know what you think of the show. If you want to be a friend of the show and be a guest on the show, I'm happy to have you. Happy to welcome you guys on. Remember, all our guests, you don't only just get a copy of the episode that we're going to watch, you also get access to the entire library. So, Jesse, you're welcome.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And you know what?
Especially after this episode. Thank you. I cannot wait to see how the next dozen episodes play out.
Yeah. When this started, I was kind of like, that's a curse. And I was laughing about it. Now, halfway into it, that's a gift. These episodes, this show is good, and we're going to get into that when we start this episode. So it's season 2, episode 1, SKAR Under Siege, and here we go. So the drawback of watching these the way we're watching them, which is bootleg old VHS recordings, is that I'm never really sure what is just cut off by the recording or what was, official. So starting with the beginning of the show, season 1 always started with those live action video shorts, which are amazing. And Jesse, I urge you go back and watch them. There's no live action in this. We got SKAR Under Siege. It's written by Roger Sliffer, who's fantastic. And it picks up immediately after the end of season 1. The Joes are all getting the Medal of Valor. And before we go any further, one thing we need to note, in the opening credits of the show, there is a very subtle change. There's no reason explained for it. But our friend Ballistic is now no longer our friend Ballistic. His name is now Eagle Eye.
Yeah, he comes into play a little later in the in the episode.
Steel Raven, there she is. Yeah, he's in this episode a lot, and he looks. I think they tweaked his design a little bit, although I didn't go back and double reference that. But he looked more and more like Cable than I feel like he did in the first season.
He did, and he seemed to be very cool, calm, and collected. And I because I haven't seen these, right?
Yeah.
And not picking up on the transition of the code name, I thought it was almost like Spirit, right?
Right.
You know, he seemed to be very in control, right?
Right.
That was how he struck me.
Yeah. I just thought that he was a new character. I didn't realize it was actually still Ballistic, to be honest. But the wiki is saying that it's Ballistic. So we're going to go with Ballistic unless otherwise proven incorrectly. But if you remember at the end of the last episode, Iron Klaw has disguised himself as Clancy. So now they all think Iron Klaw's dead. And we just got this sinister look into Clancy's Clancy's eyes. So we know that he's still Iron Klaw. And there's a lot of this episode that does a lot of narrative heavy lifting, you know? Oh, that's cool. There's because didn't the Washington Monument got knocked down? They even drew it with scaffolding because they're fixing it.
Okay, I was wondering about that because I was wondering if there was actually refurbishment going on at the Washington Monument.
No,
at the time that this was done.
In part 1 of episode 12, in part 1 of the 2-part finale, who was it? Stone was being held captive there, and I think it was Black Dragon broke into the Washington Monument to rescue him, and in doing so, the whole monument got knocked down. So I love that. They even in just a subtle background, they're fixing the Washington Monument. That's great.
Yeah. I did pick up on that, and I thought, oh, that was an interesting piece of storytelling in the background, right? It was as they were walking by. And
now for the viewers, we were introduced to Steel Raven last season, and very briefly in one episode, they never even gave her a name, but she's been given a name, and we're seeing a flashback of hers where she joins SKAR for the first time. And she's remembering how much she adored Iron Klaw. And then in the middle of that memory, it's interrupted by this video image of Iron Klaw calling her. And this is him telling her that he's still alive, which is shocking to everyone.
Yeah, because the understanding is that he has disappeared, but instead he is just undercover as Clancy. If I'm following the story. That
is correct. But he tells her to not tell anyone. Let everyone assume that he's dead, which is really key for what happens in the rest of this specific episode. He needs to keep his cover.
Yeah.
But what's also cool is we get a follow-up on Clancy in this episode too. And this is
he's in a bad way.
Yeah, and he's also still alive. We also assumed he might have been killed, but Clancy's. Now here we go. I think this is it.
So we're on the other side of the video transmission here.
So he basically tells her she needs to go get Clancy out of the castle that they fought in the last episode, because he needs to know all the stuff that Clancy knew. And actually, as I say that, I might have jumped the gun. That might be in the later scene. So I think we don't know all of her instructions. And now this guy, they also introduced the scientist with SKAR. I think his name's Mark or something, which is a funny name for a show like this.
Yeah. I thought it was really interesting as we go through this. Now, this is this Rampage that we're looking at here?
Yes.
Okay. So you know, as you've described in previous episodes, he's part Iron Man, part Hulk. I saw him. I thought he looks like War Machine to me.
Totally.
War Machine armor. And but I thought it was interesting that as we go through this, and I think this is a testimony to how well done these cartoons are, is that we now have Rampage. He's going into an office and he's having conversations, or there's conversations happening with all sorts of just like everyday people, if you will. That's supporting the effort. You know, as I was watching this, you know, I would say that these are every bit as good, if not in some instances a frog's hair better than the old Sunbow episodes. But I don't remember them having a lot of conversations like this. You may have, you know, here's the scientist or whatever from this particular episode. But there's 2, 3, 4 people in this case, they're in an office setting. But there's all these conversations happening with like non-regulars on the show, which I just thought that was really, really interesting, and truthfully sets it apart, right? It's not just, and for the most part, it wasn't just, you know, 1 or 2 words. There was some dialogue back and forth.
They named the guy. They named the guy. And then the old show, you could count on, you know, 2 hands in all the episodes the number of non-Joes or non-Cobras that actually were given names. And I do think that this, especially this episode in particular, is so good and such a Sunbow throwback that, there's a MacGuffin plot point, so to speak. You know, there's an action plot point, but most of it is character development, and that's what a lot of the Sunbow stuff did. Is they would take the time to spend with the characters, and then they'd get in a fight, and that's what they're doing on this episode. One of the flaws I felt in the first season was that there were a lot of episodes that just, when they would go to the music video parts, you know, we talked about that a lot on this show, which it would just be this extended action fight scene, and it's like, oh, okay, well, I'm more interested in what are the characters doing and why are they doing it. And we're 8 minutes into this episode, and there's been no fighting.
Yeah,
you know,
that's an excellent observation. It's been all just plot development and introducing and developing characters that we haven't seen before.
We're going to commercial. We're going to be right back.
Listeners, I know what you need in your life. You need more podcasts, and you also love movies. So why not do a podcast that's about not 1 movie? It's about not 2 movies. It's about 3 movies and a meal. I'm talking the Movies and a Meal podcast. This show is great. It's brought to you by Keith, Brad, and Ben, and each week they bring a new movie to the table, which they all discuss as a group. And it's not, your highfalutin movies. It's What We Do in the Shadows, The Fantastic Four, Rise of the Silver Surfer, and Out of Sight. It's Bad Education, Ghost Rider, and A View to a Kill. It's X-Men Last Stand, Queen Sugar, The Mandalorian, and Major League 2. They are a lot of fun to listen to. You guys know Ben. It's our friend Ben Pensarga. He was a guest on Joe and Joe. In fact, Ben was the very first remote guest that I ever had on this podcast, so he's always got a special place in my heart. I'm really digging this. I just started listening to it last week. It is a lot of fun. They bring a guest in. The guest, I listened to their Heathers episode. They were joined by Kelly, and she went in depth on her favorite movie, which was Heathers, and it made me want to go watch Heathers to watch with them. I really dig it. So guys, find them out there at Movies and a Meal, Twitter, Instagram. Their website is moviesandameal.podbean.com. They put out 1 episode a week. give them a listen, guys. Support them. Let them know Joe on Joe sent you. I don't think you're going to be disappointed. It is quite entertaining. And now back to the show.
And we're back, and now we get some action, and this is great too because this is so. We heard that basically Rampage, listeners, for you guys aren't watching this along, Rampage took control of SKAR. So Rampage who believes Iron Klaw's dead, he took control of SKAR, and he quickly learned that there's no money left. SKAR is broke. They're not being run by Iron Klaw, so they're falling apart. So he was saying, we're gonna attack Fort Knox. I feel like in the first season, the attack on Fort Knox would have been the third act. That would have been the whole point of this. We just jump right to it. They're already attacking Fort Knox. Like, that was like they trusted the viewers enough to just get to the action. So now we're seeing that not only are they attacking Fort Knox, but all that they're doing very poorly. SKAR is. There's a lot of
They are struggling, and I'm curious, Joe, just because you've seen these with what's happening here. We see that apparently SKAR is attacking Fort Knox. The Joes aren't there repelling this, so somehow there's some fighting back.
Real quick, Rampage straight up killed that guy. The guy with the broken leg.
So they're stretching a SKAR soldier along here.
Yeah.
Which we would have got a parachute.
Right.
We got a parachute in Sunbow, right?
Yeah.
And Rampage is not happy to see people going in the wrong direction from the battlefield.
Yeah. If this were anything other than a children's cartoon, that guy would have just been shot in the head by Rampage. That's what we're dealing with here, because he's so frustrated because a guy who only broke only broke a leg is leaving the battlefield, and that's how terrible of a leader he is.
Yeah. So it's a very interesting, and I've just observed this, and it seems like oftentimes the bad guys, they send their troops out ahead of them, and the leaders stand behind. And in this case, well, like, why are you coming back?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, that was Cobra Commander. Cobra Commander sent everybody else, and then he stayed back.
Right.
Whereas Duke was always the guy that was out in front.
And that was the character. That was what made the character of Serpentor so different from Cobra Commander. Remember, because he led with the troops up front.
Yep. I mean, and those are leadership styles, leadership philosophies that we see here. But it was very, very distinct between the two. Now we have the Joes showing up, and I also found it interesting that, and correct me if I'm wrong on this, Joe.
I love Freight, by the way. He's so great.
Oh, yeah,
Freight just took out 4 dudes. He's great.
Yeah, he's about as wide as 4 of these guys.
Oh yeah,
and he's punting everybody.
Yes,
his primary.
He just punted.
But none of them wear helmets.
No.
There's Lieutenant Stone, no helmet.
Yep.
I think Sergeant Savage is the only one. Savage
wears a helmet. Yeah, Savage does. And also, let's also point out here that not only was SKAR losing, they were losing before the Joes showed up. So just the regular Fort Knox security was holding SKAR at bay. And the Joes showed up and he just punted that guy again.
Yeah, he punts him off screen and then 3/4 away across the next image that you get. So, it's something else.
So real quick on Freight, who last episode with our friend Steve Jubber, he had asked me, who my favorite extreme guy was. Wait, real quick. So that's quote unquote Eagle Eye. You know what they're doing different? They gave him white hair.
Okay,
that's what's different about this. Yes, I think there's a slight design tweak too but he has white hair in this. That's why I didn't realize that was Ballistic, and that's also why he looks like Cable.
Oh yeah, with the shoulder pads and stuff like that.
And
I absolutely see.
They probably did that because one of the observations we had for the first season was that they all look alike. And this goes back to Steve's question last episode of who my favorite was. And I was like, they're all the same. They all kind of wear the same pouches. They all kind of look the same. And I think one of the reasons why it drew me to Freight is the style, the design ethos of a really good design character is one that you can tell by his silhouette. Like someone in silhouette you can look at and go, oh, that's Dr. Doom. Oh, that's Reed. Oh, that's Ben Grimm. And
Right.
on with G.I. Joe Extreme, you can go, oh, that's Freight, and everyone else is the same.
That's how we've been passing time during COVID on social media. People will post the the picture of 30 silhouettes. You can only name one and move along. Right?
Yeah,
So,
right.
You know.
Yeah, and that's and I think absolutely that plays out here. We're going to commercial. We'll be right back. We'll talk more about this. I like this.
Today's Filecard Feature is on the final G.I. Joe member that we have yet to cover here for G.I. Joe Extreme, Metalhead. His file name is Matt Hurley, and he's a computer communications genius, an electronic warfare whiz. He blasts his rock and roll music in the heat of battle. He gets the job done with an in-your-face attitude and cranked-up tunes. The louder, the better. Metalhead is one of the biggest stereotypes on the show, in that he's just a yeah man. He's got that kind of vibe, right, where he's got the long hair. He looks like someone who absolutely was at a Cold Slither concert. What I like about him is that he is totally competent, and he is absolutely in the moment, and whenever he's had to do something on the show, he gets it done. And even in that episode when he got hurt and Freight felt all bad about it, he didn't give Freight any grief about it. He's just like, that's the line of duty. In a way, like, Metalhead's kind of the best, like, true character, because he's doing his job, and he's actually, all this characterization, all this personalization is coming through, and his personality couldn't be further from, the button down military type. He's got a cool looking toy. He's got this he's got a peace symbol necklace around an open shirt. He's just wearing a vest, long blonde hair, torn up jeans. He's probably the most non-military looking guy out of all of them. There's really only like some kind of pouch around his legs that makes him look like he's somewhat military. And of course he comes with, a gun and a missile launcher and all that stuff. So, but I like him. I like Matt Hurley, Metalhead, the communication specialist and heavy metal rocker. We salute you.
And we're back. Yeah, so I think the reason Metalhead stands out is because he's different looking. Obviously, Mayday, she's the only girl. But, Steel and Savage and Ballistic and Harpoon.
Now, has Harpoon been in this one?
No, I haven't. No, he's not on this episode. But they all look, those four dudes all look the same. And then when you get Quick Strike and Freight, they both have these great distinct looks, right? Physically and in silhouette. So to then bring that to, why would they have changed him to Eagle Eye? The name change, I don't know. Maybe that was a toy thing. Maybe there was some kind of toy copyright issue for the name. But the look, I get why they would have changed his look, because now, at least visually, color-wise, he's different from all the other plain white bread dudes.
Yeah, he absolutely stands out. I would say that he probably stood out to me the most in this episode, and in that particular part, he's standing down wreckage in the coming at him in a tank. Right?
And real quick, we need to catch the viewers up on what's going on. So the Joes, they won, and they beat back at Fort Knox. But as they were kind of chilling and going, hey, we won the day, they now are attacked by a different faction of SKAR, led by Steel Raven. And they're caught off guard. Think of the opening of the second G.I. Joe movie, G.I. Joe Retaliation, how they were chilling in the field and then they got ambushed. And the one where Duke died, think of, like, that's what was happening here. And so now they're getting taken to task by SKAR, and they're losing. They're not doing well.
So there's been an absolute ton of development in this story so far, and we're 15 minutes into it, something like that. We had the whole first act. It was all essentially expository. We're just developing stuff. We went to commercial break. We came back. We came back with battle.
Freight has a hole. Freight has a hole in his sock, and he just put his used sock in Rampage's mouth. That's great.
Now, because Freight actually tore Rampage's armor off of him. Does that affect whether or not he turns into the Hulk-like creature?
Earlier, no. They've always shown him as kind of just being angry, but earlier it looked like he took a pill. And I think, because obviously it's his quote powers are chemically induced. I think they have something to do with that drug that Iron Klaw was using last season. So but no, the armor is separate. That's why it's always weird to me. They're all kind of mashups, and I think that's because they didn't have a wide variety of characters. You know, Inferno is a fire guy, but he's also the head of all the technology stuff. You know, like a toy man kind of thing. And Rampage is a CEO like Tomax Zaymont, but he's also an armor, an Iron Man armor, and he's the Hulk. You know, and even Iron Klaw is Cobra Commander and Zartan combined, because he's a master of disguise, as you see with Clancy, and he's in the comics, he's master of disguise, but he's also Cobra Commander. You know, like I think there was, with the maybe the financial need to keep the line a little smaller, they wanted to hit as many bases storytelling wise as possible. That's the feeling I get.
And I think that's accurate, because I was looking at Wreckage, or Rampage.
Wreckage is the big hulking brute dude with a metal arm and an eye patch. And Rampage is the guy that turns into
so Rampage is part Destro then too, right?
Yeah, a little bit.
Okay.
A little bit, yeah.
Because he's the supplier.
No, that's I'm sorry. Yes, Rampage is. Yes, he's also part you're 100% right. Rampage is Destro, he's the Hulk guy. Wreckage is the big guy with the metal arm.
And who's this guy now? I'm sorry.
Well, that's Quick.
You're right.
So that's Quick Strike, and he's cool. He's the ex-SKAR agent who SKAR experimented on his brother and killed his brother. So he turned against Iron Klaw and joined the Joe team, and so they didn't trust him for a little bit of time. Very, very, very early in the series, and then his episode where he redeems himself was like episode 2 or something. So quickly he's taken in as member of the team. And Steel Raven, she's great. She visually is awesome. They introduced her briefly in last season, and they never said her name. And now we find out that she's this super capable, like, lieutenant in arms. She's awesome.
So she's a little bit Baroness-esque,
yes,
if I can say that.
Yes, she's like Baroness meets Major Blood.
Major Blood,
yeah.
Exactly. Because she's got the eye patch.
So. Yep. I love that Freight and he's getting help this time. Last time Freight lifted a tank, he did it by himself. But this time it looks like Savage is helping him lift that tank. So the Joes are really getting trounced. Although they just launched a missile that Rampage was like strapped to the firing cone for, and that exhaust would have just destroyed him. That exhaust would have just destroyed him. But they did manage to quote unquote save the day. They still have Rampage held captive, but they got their butts handed to them.
Yeah, this was not an easy victory.
No,
they took some lumps here, and they are by no means out of the woods yet, right? We apparently have been introduced to a very viable villain lead with Sky Raven and
Steel Raven.
Steel Raven, and we still have Clancy undercover.
Oh yeah, and
I have him, Iron Klaw.
This is the part I was talking about. So the secret mission he sent her on earlier. Sorry, kids, if I spoiled it for you. This is the reveal of the episode, that Clancy is still alive. The secret mission he said, "I have a mission for you." It was to go back to the castle and get him. He had hidden Clancy behind the wall. And look at this. This is great continuity. Clancy's glasses fell off when he got captured, and they were stepped on by Stone. And so now when we see Clancy again, he doesn't have his glasses, which makes sense because his glasses got destroyed. So it's a very, very, very small bit of continuity that makes complete sense, and they paid attention to, and I respect it.
Yeah, not knowing that, I thought that was good, and it looks like they're setting him up with something like the old brainwave scanner.
Yeah, yeah, because he needs to get all the data. He needs to get the information out of Clancy so that his ruse would be successful. So that's it. Now, different from the first season, guys, listeners, there's no PSA. I've watched the next episode. There's no PSA. So I don't know if the PSA is continued at all. We're now on this version. We have a commercial for this next block of shows, which included Beast Wars and Reboot and There you go, G.I. Joe Extreme. And so the theme song's different. Like, the credits are different. The opening credits to the show, too, were a little different. Besides just saying Eagle Eye. They, and that's Gunther Wall, I think, is a new production company on this.
So this stuck out to me because I was trying to place this series, like what was happening amongst, fandom, like you and me, Joe, at this time, because I was thinking, all right, so we have G.I. Joe Extreme. We also have the X-Men animated series.
Yeah, and this would have aired September of '96.
Yeah, and I believe that would have corresponded to the last season of X-Men starting.
Yep.
And then the animated Spider-Man series was going on. They would have been, I think, about halfway through season 3, season 4.
It was pretty concurrent, yeah.
Yeah, something.
Well, the X-Men,
like that,
I think, around. Let me think. '96. The X-Men, the year prior, I think they did. They did the Phoenix Saga.
Okay. That may very well be accurate with that. I was trying to, because there were so many really cool cartoons. Well, as comic guys like you and me, and more so you than me, but in the early '90s, we got this whole series of really cool properties coming to cartoons, right? Mm-hmm. We had obviously Batman the animated series was significant, but we had X-Men, we had but there was also the time where they had Iron Man and the Avengers and the Fantastic Four.
Yep.
And I find at least this first seasons of those to be a little tough, but like those were done. And now, you have Spider-Man going, you've got X-Men going, Batman was probably still going about that time. And now you introduce G.I. Joe into this. And now that we're getting into the second season, I believe, and any of your listeners can probably correct me on this, but there was something called the Power Block, which was apparently that was the show. And I would tell you that I came across the Power Block whenever I was in college one morning. And I don't even know. Typically, I would get up. I would just turn Sports Center on because it was, endless reruns of Sports Center back then, every morning. And I flipped through and I came across an episode of Beast Wars, and it was computer generated, right? So it was along the lines of Toy Story, whatever. And I'm watching it, and I don't really understand what's going on here, but they threw out. They threw out the name shrapnel. It was a callback to the old Insecticon, and that sort of caught my interest. But like every day of the week, there was just a different property that was used within this Power Block. And at least in Pennsylvania, I believe Beast Wars was on Friday. And with my class schedule at school, I could catch at least part of that. But this was put in there. And so because it was interesting as I was watching the episode in preparation, Lieutenant Stone's voice was so familiar, and I was like, why is this voice familiar? And then I looked it up, and I believe he was voiced by Gary Chalk, who is the same gentleman that did the voice of Optimus Primal.
Nice.
So I haven't been able to cross-reference any other names, but I think that was just a neat deal. Because my guess is that everything in the Power Block probably uses very similar voice talent, would be my guess.
Yeah, that seems to make sense. Like they would sell it as a big package, like the production companies. Yeah, that seems to make sense. The 90s are such a weird time for animation. As CG was making and computers were making everything cheaper, they also were learning how to make them look better. Yeah, but they were also then hewing closer to the source material, like in the case you were talking about with Spider-Man and X-Men. Those were very, very true to the comic books, and obviously Batman the Animated Series is an all-time legend. So it was good and bad. I think it was really strong for writing. It's funny. I think the animation was strong for writing in the 90s, when in the comic books the writing was terrible in the 90s, but the art was flashier. You know what I'm saying? Like, so there was a weird inverse effect between the cartoons being written better but drawn worse,
Well,
and the comic books being drawn worse but being written worse but being drawn better.
And I think that sort of is what we're seeing on the big screen now, right? Where,
Yeah.
you know, a lot of these things that we're getting, they call back even to some of the source content that we see that was animated in the 90s, right?
Right.
You know, with X-Men and Phoenix and
Sure,
stuff like
yeah.
that. And you know,
you're getting kids from that era are now old enough to make the decisions at a lot of the studios, you know, and the production houses. So they look back and go, "Oh man, Age of Apocalypse was awesome. Let me do my Age of Apocalypse story." You know, that's kind of the trend that we're seeing.
Now, Joe, are you, knowing you're a comic guy, are you more of a DC guy or more of a Marvel guy?
I'm honestly both.
Okay.
Both. Yeah, I can't really pick sides. My collection hues about, I think it's like 60% Marvel.
Okay.
But you know, based different eras, I prefer different. Like Marvel's been a hot mess for the last few years, but but so was DC for 5 years during the 5 years the New 52. So it goes in eras, but I really have a real love for both universes.
Yeah, I would say I'm a Marvel guy. I can remember I can remember my first Marvel comic was Fantastic Four 266.
Love it.
I mean I can also tell you my first DC comic.
Well, hold on, wait. 266. That's John Byrne.
Charisma
It's
Command.
John.
Yeah.
I was just gonna say, I
Sorry.
was gonna pull a Mark Waid, and yeah, it was 2 issues in 268 is when they found Jean Grey Phoenix. So yeah, it's Charisma, and she's on the cover, and she's wearing like a veil headdress thing, and she's doing like a Mesmero kind of move on.
Yeah.
She doing it on Johnny or Ben?
Ben.
It's Ben. It is Ben. Yeah.
Yep.
Nice.
Yep. And so a big fan of the Thing, going way back.
Oh, listen, listen, Jesse, you're guy after my own heart. All right, kid. I mean,
Well, that goes,
no one should be a fan of that no good Nick Johnny.
So my old man bought the comic book collection from the art teacher at my dad was a 6th grade teacher.
Awesome.
And bought the comic collection from the art teacher, and he turned around and flipped it is what he did. But this art teacher had Fantastic Four back to issue 10.
Whoa.
And as I think I was in 2nd grade at the time, you know, I read all those, you know, I went through all the, I can still
this monster.
Yeah. Well, was it Fantastic Four 25, Thing versus Hulk.
Poor that Jade monster. He's a piece of work.
And then the Coming of Galactus, all those.
Oh, that's amazing.
All of those.
Yeah.
All of those things. I've held issues in my hand, which I haven't done that for a long time.
That's great.
But yeah, those were some of my formative years there. And learn now. But in that collection, there wasn't a whole lot. There wasn't a whole lot of DC.
Mm-hmm.
And so it wasn't until I heard all this buzz about the Justice League that I ended up in my first DC comic was several years later. It was Justice League 5. Now, I don't know if you can describe that cover, but
Justice League 5. No, I'm not as keen on my Justice League, early Justice Leagues.
That's and I hope I'm not misstating this, but that's the famous One Punch issue. So
you're talking about just not Justice League of America, Justice League with Kevin Maguire, Keith Giffen.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, that's One Punch. Absolutely.
Yeah. So that was my first introduction.
One Punch on Guy Gardner, the best, the best fight in any comic book ever.
And he was out for what, like 3 issues or something?
Oh, he was. Well, it gave him. So he knocked him out, and then when he woke up, he hit his head on the underside of the control panel, and then that gave him like a amnesia kind of nice guy syndrome. So he was a nice guy for the next 10 issues until he got his head hit, until they hit him in the head again, and then became an asshole.
Well, yeah, that was. Didn't Lobo come and rough him up?
Yeah, it was. It was Lobo that he punched. Yes.
Yeah, there was something there, but
I love Guy
yeah,
Gardner.
that was how it went.
Yes. Oh yeah, that Justice League, absolutely.
So yeah, I've sort of through the quarantine, I've sort of rekindled my love for some of these childhood delights, and so I've picked up some Bronze Age key issues. So I picked up the first appearance of Cloak and Dagger.
Nice.
I believe I picked up the first appearance of Elektra. These are things that were sort of before my time in buying comics myself, but just doing some of that.
It's good to do that now that you're an adult. You go back and you pick up the cool things that you always wanted as a kid.
Yeah, absolutely. Although my wife may challenge the thought that I've become an adult.
Well, that's true. That's true. that is, hey, age is nothing but enough. But before we can't go any further though, because we promised at the top of the show that we're gonna have to give you a new code name, and you said you've been thinking about this. So you're no longer Pharma Joe.
Well, I guess if Ballistic can change his name to Eagle Eye,
yeah.
Why can't I change my name? And really, what I was playing War on Cobra, the mobile game, and there's times that I sort of feel like I'm doing good, and then there's times that I log in and my base is on fire, and I logged in and my base was on fire, and it said, "You have been defeated by Joe on Joe Pod, Joe on Joe Pod, Joe on Joe Pod," and I said, "What the heck?" And so I realized that my code name, I didn't use the right code name, because if I would have used the right code name, I probably would have been spared that malicious onslaught. But about the time that these episodes would have been on now, has been chronicled already in our time here today. I live out in the middle of nowhere. There's more livestock where I live than there's people, right? Mm-hmm. So we didn't get cable TV where I lived, but whenever I got to be college age, we got a 6.5 foot satellite dish in the backyard, and you had 500 potential channels. A lot of them were just empty. But what was interesting is I came across a channel called Channel America. And another one of my interests as a kid, and I guess even into adulthood, there's no need to hide it. But I liked watching pro wrestling. Nice. And there was Channel America every night at 10 o'clock would have a different wrestling promotion on. So it was Smoky Mountain or USWA or whatever. But that's where I came into being introduced to something called ECW. And I don't know if you're a wrestling guy or not, Joe.
Yeah, I remember that.
But ECW was Extreme Championship Wrestling.
Yeah.
Which that coincides also. So we start talking about some of the different cartoons that were on. Everything in the 90s was going extreme. And so if you had the opportunity to watch any of those shows night after night, they were night and day different. And the lead bad guy on ECW was a guy by the name of Shane Douglas, and he went by the nickname of the Franchise. And he's from Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh is the closest guy. So from that time, my handle on different message, and not that I was on message boards a whole lot, but sure. I would always put my screen name as the Franchise.
Okay.
And that's what I did on War on Cobra, which again got me mercilessly assaulted by Joe on Joe Pop. So that said, my screen name on War on Cobra is Franchise, and that's sort of the name, and that I picked up years ago. I don't know that it necessarily fits with anything else, but that's if we can just arbitrarily change names, I'll arbitrarily
absolutely
change names.
Well, listen, franchise, welcome back to the Joe on Joe Extreme. Well, no, wait a minute, no, that's it. Pharma Joe was when you were on G.I. Joe. They asked you to join Extreme, and you became Franchise.
Yeah,
because that's your extreme name.
Absolutely. No. For the listeners, I will tell you that as I listened to this podcast, I thought that Joe's extreme call out there was just something that he dubbed over. But I want you to know that's live every time, and it is absolutely
extreme.
Awesome, brother. So I couldn't pull that off. I don't think.
I'm a human. I'm a human sound machine.
Absolutely. You do it next. I thought for sure you were just hitting a button, or you were layering that.
Yeah.
No. But
Nope.
no. That's live each time.
Totally
So
live. And every time
you are extreme.
Every time I do it, I can look across the room and I can see my wife giving me the evil eye of. I did it. We were walking the dogs the other day, and she just was like, "I hate you so much."
So,
oh, it's awesome. Well,
anyway,
Jesse, this has been a delight, man. It's really great to reconnect with you. Exciting to hear about your new direction in your career and working with the diabetes and with all the treatments and stuff. That's fantastic. Remember, listeners, if this is something, if you're out there, reach out to me. I'll get you in touch with Jesse, and we'll see if there's a pharmacy in your area that is working with his organization for some of these new treatments to help make people's lives better. Franchise, a delight hearing from you again.
Oh, it's so good to be back. It's good to be here amongst friends. And let me encourage any of your listeners. You want to get in line. You want to get in line to be a guest on this show, no matter how like Joe, you couldn't have a more incompetent guest than me. All I said, I have no idea how much editing you're going to have to do on this podcast, but I'm pretty sure you're going to edit out me just saying yes or yeah or whatever as so times throughout the course of us watching the show. I'm just yeah, but you want to get on here. You want to get access to these to these episodes, because these are absolutely excellent.
Yeah, they're really good.
Excellent. I cannot wait to see how the story unfolds and goes from there. And I would even echo your call, Joe, that this needs a proper treatment.
It really does
to be released. And
because it's really, like, the next episode is written by Marv Wolfman of all people. Marv Wolfman.
That's Crisis on Infinite Earths.
Yeah,
right?
that's Marv, Teen Titans, Marv Wolfman. This show is really, really good. It does not deserve to be in the dustbin of G.I. Joe history. So we're going to do our part. Jesse, franchise, formerly Pharma Joe, I apologize for all the destruction I rained down upon your upon your team in the G.I. Joe mobile game. Oh, speaking of video games, I retweeted this the other day. Apparently, there's some game studio. I think they work on the Warhammer style games. That apparently they are working on a G.I. Joe IP. So that's exciting. I don't know anything more about for consoles and stuff. I don't know anything more about it. But someone somewhere listed a job listing as something about working on the G.I. Joe IP. So if it followed suit of the other games that they work on, it's more probably like a top-down RTS kind of real-time strategy kind of game. But which I'd be so here for. That'd be great. So hopefully that comes to fruition. But Jesse, thank you so much for being a guest on Joe Extreme.
Thanks for having me, Joe. We'll see you again soon.
You got it. Now you Joe, and Joeing is half the battle. Extreme!